Good morning and welcome to the series of Sunday Theology talks on the Gospel of Matthew. To you are here and to the people who are following via the live stream. So we've reached the fifth of these talks. The last one, please notice I made again a mistake in your handout. I think it's not on May 17th because next Sunday we have the Bishop's Visitation. So the Mass, the Eucharist, is going to be at 10 o'clock and there's going to be no theology class. So the last one is going to be on May 24th in the morning, and we are going to talk about the resurrection. And we carry on our Thursday reading groups, obviously, on the Beatitude, the chapters 5 to 7 of the Gospel of Matthew. Today we are going to focus on the crucifixion of Jesus, the passion narrative in the Gospel of Matthew. And I hope to show you how when you read the passion narrative not outside the Gospel, as we do most of the time in the liturgy. So the passion narratives, as you know, are read during Holy Week on Thursday, on Good Friday, we always read the Passion according to St. John, and then on the Palm Sunday, every year we read one of the synoptics, either Matthew, Mark, or Luke. This year we read the Gospel of Matthew. But it is, the Passion narrative is taken out of the context, and it is quite difficult to see what is specific to each Gospels in the way they present understand the death of Jesus. As you know, also, every Good Friday, there is the 3-hour devotion between midday and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This is something that I never saw in the Catholic Church. It's typical to the Anglican and especially Episcopalians. And so it's a 3-hour service where we invite a preacher. 1 year I did it during my first year here, and I always say it's one of the most gruesome things I've ever done. Because you have to preach 7 sermons over these 3 hours, so 7 sermons of 15 minutes each, 10-15 minutes each, on the 7 last words on the cross. I put the 7 last words here in number 1 in your handout. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Truly, I say to you, today I will be with you in paradise, etc., etc. And the interesting thing, what makes really that preaching particularly difficult, is that there is no gospel that has all the 7 words. 2 of them are from Luke, 1 from John, 1 from Matthew, 1 from Mark, other 2 from John, and 1 from the Gospel of Luke. And this is important because why words so important should have not been recorded by all the Gospels. The reason is that each of the Gospels adopts a particular and different angle, theological angle, to the passion of Jesus. And often there are even contradictions between the different versions, or the way in which Jesus' attitude towards his death and suffering and death is presented in a very stark difference. For instance, in the Gospel of John, there is this sense that Jesus, yes, suffers, of course, but in a way which is glorious. He is always presented as the glorious figure that almost marches through his passion. Whereas Mark has a very stark vision that really stresses Jesus' weakness and desolation. Luke insists a lot on forgiveness. It really is the only gospel that has the scene of Jesus forgiving one of the 2 kind of thieves on either side of the cross. And Matthew, what is specific to Matthew, and how what we have seen so far about the Gospel of Matthew and the narrative arc, which I tried to trace for you up to now helps us to see what is specific to Matthew's approach. So at the end, someone has noticed that it's quite a heavy handout today, but it is because at the end of the handout, I gave to you something that this was the work I did when I was preparing the sermons, the 7 sermons on the cross. You have this kind of synopsis of the Passion narrative in the 4 Gospels. Okay, I put Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you can see obviously the 3 synoptic Gospels, as they are called, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, tend to be quite similar, although there are a lot of discrepancies, and John does a completely different thing, as always. So this is a way of showing you how the Passion narrative is different in each one of them, and I'm not going to go into details other than stressing what are the things that we find only in the Gospel of Matthew, because they are quite significant. So if you go through the synopsis, and you see that there are some passages which are highlighted. I'm afraid they were highlighted in green, but here in the black and white photocopy it doesn't show. But basically in verse 39, I think, yes, those who passed by, did you see that? Verse 39. Okay, it's almost at the last page. Oh yeah, the number of pages probably of the synopsis is different, but it's page 3 of the synopsis. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their head and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself, come down from the cross," which is very similar to what we find in Mark, for instance, and is not found in either Luke or John. But there is a significant change in Matthew's Gospel. The people who insult him says, "If you are the Son of God." If you are the Son of God. So let's start with the last passage, and then I'm going to go to the 2 others, where Jesus says, or rather the people insult Jesus by saying, "If he is the Son of God, or if you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." So if you go back to the initial pages of your handout to number 1, yes, again, the numbers here are all over the place. So page 2, at the bottom of page 2. So I give you the passage, only Matthew's version of the Passion, you find this sentence. No parallel in Mark, Luke, and John. But this passage is chronologically a bit curious, because it is said, you see, Jesus just died on the cross, but he's still not risen from the cross. He's not even risen from the dead. He has not even been taken down from the cross. But it is said, the bodies of many holy people. So as soon as Jesus died, also the other thing in the Gospel of Matthew, there is an earthquake. The veil of the temple is torn in 2. The earthquake in particular is something that we find only in him. And then they came out of the tombs, the holy people, after Jesus' resurrection, as is said, and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. So Jesus is still on the cross, and this passage is presented here is like put there almost, chronologically, it just doesn't make sense there. And the idea of many exegetes is that this is a tradition that belonged to the Jewish community of Jerusalem, and actually it's quite important for Jewish listeners of the gospel, because Jewish listeners had in their head what you find in number 2 in the following page in your handout. Matthew is that the resurrection of the holy ones at the end of time was a standard feature of Jewish eschatology. So basically, and I gave you a quotation from Daniel and from Ezekiel. Daniel, the prophet Daniel, says that at the end of time, the angel Michael, the archangel, will rise, etc., etc. And at the end, the passage underlined, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake. So the Jewish had in their mind that if they saw people coming out of the tombs, it meant that the end of time had come. So eschatology means the end of time. So Matthew, in a sense, what he's trying to say, putting that quotation there, is that the end of times has come, but he says this in a way that can be understood only by Jewish people, okay? And this is quite important because it means that, I'm afraid there are no more chairs today. They left only a few chairs, I'm so sorry. And this is quite important because it shows that Matthew wrote for a Jewish community, and especially for the community of Jerusalem, okay? And this says something. So we always think, the Gospels, the authors of the Gospels wrote for the whole world, okay, for everyone. We think that, they were written for us, for the whole times. In reality, they're just as the letters of Paul, for instance, they are addressed to a special community, and they are a way of addressing the problems, the concerns of that particular community. And this is one of the reasons that explain the differences between the Gospels, but also justifies interpretation. We need to interpret these texts because they are much more contextual, much more linked to a historical, social, political context than we might often imagine. If you go further to number 4, Matthew is the only gospel that has the guards at the tomb, okay, which has become so popular in iconography. There's a lot of paintings of the soldiers sleeping, etc., etc. Well, surprise, surprise, it is only in one gospel, in the Gospel of Matthew. And why is it in the Gospel of Matthew? Because there were rumors circulating in Jerusalem, in the community where he was when he was writing his gospel, that Jesus' body had been taken away. Okay, so and there was also rumors circulating that the soldiers had been bribed. So this is why he puts this scene in this particular gospel. So I'm not going to stress, because it's not the most interesting part in what is specific to the passion narrative of Matthew, but I wanted to stress this, or at least to draw your attention on this, because it is important to see how the Gospels are different from each other, just as like any literary text. They need to be understood, or if you want to understand them, we need to understand who were the people they tried to address. So number 5, though, the most interesting trait of traits proper to Matthew, though, are the passages which I read to you. And I hope that your ears perk when you hear these sentences, because this will show that you have been good followers, good listeners of everything which I've tried to tell you up to now. And if you don't, go back to see the handouts of the previous lectures and watch the edited video recordings. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself, come down from the cross if you are the Son of God. Now, where do you remember having heard this sentence? Who said this sentence before?
The desert.
The devil in the desert. Okay? So you see how interesting it is that Matthew is the only one who does that, puts on the lips of, on the mouths of those who are watching Jesus die on the cross, the same temptation, the same sentence that the devil used to tempt Jesus in the desert. I remind you of this in the following page. Jesus is led up in the desert into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil, and the devil says to him, if you are the Son of God, command that these stones become loaves of bread. So basically, if you are the Son of God, remember, act yourself, do it, show it, make something extraordinary. This is what the people say to him, the priests themselves. If he's the Son of God, well, that's the moment to show it. Come down from the cross. If you are the Son of God, again, throw yourself down from the pinnacle of the temple. So, number 7, the way the devil tempts Jesus, as we saw, focuses on what it means to be the Son of God, what it means to be God. For the devil to be God means either to show it in a kind of extravagant, extraordinary way through miracles, to grand gestures, or to take your destiny into your own hands. You are the master of your destiny. You should decide, what to do. So it really hinges upon what it means to be a child of God, what it means to act in the name of God, and what it means to act as God. This, I think, intentionally, for Matthew, makes the behavior of Jesus on the cross the supreme demonstration of the real way of acting as the Son, the child of God. We saw that the description of the way a Son of God, a child of God should behave was given in the Sermon of the Mountain. If you remember, the whole sermon is do this, do this, do this, that you may be children of your Father in heaven, of your heavenly Father. Only if you are poor in spirit, only if you are meek, only if you are peacemaker, only if you forgive your enemies, only if you go the extra mile, etc., you act as a child of God. In the desert, what the devil is tempting Jesus to do is not wait for the Father to act. It's basically saying to him, you are God, you are hungry, make bread. And you can do bread. I mean, if you remember, I mentioned this to you, Jesus was going to multiply breads, loaves of bread. If you are God, show it. And Jesus did show it by walking on the water. If he walked on the water, he could have thrown himself from the temple. Significantly, he walked, the only witnesses of him walking on water were his disciples. And this is important because, not because he wanted a small audience for this, but because these signs, he could do these signs on occasion, but they had to be shown only to people who already had a sense of what it meant to be God, what it meant to be the Son of God. Otherwise, they would have been misinterpreted. And even, with despite Jesus is like patience with them, the disciples would not still understand. And we saw also that at the end of when the devil finally gives up and goes away, then angels come to serve Jesus. So the Father does intervene. God does send angels to bring bread to him, but it is when the Father decides to act. So to be a child of God means keep trusting in the Father and waiting for him to act until the end. And there is a sense in which on the cross the same thing happens. Okay, Jesus does not take could have come down from the cross, but waits for the Father to come and rescue him. And the tragedy, obviously, of the cross is that the Father doesn't seem to be coming. Actually, doesn't come because Jesus dies. It dies, especially according to the Gospel of Mark, in despair, because and in shock, because he does say, oh, my God, why you abandoned me? Okay, so in the sense of abandonment, And it's only afterwards that Jesus is raised from the dead, okay? Interestingly, in Scripture, this is an action of the Father. It's not Jesus who rises himself from the dead. He is raised by the Father. So it is the vindication of the Father. It is the moment the Father decides to act. This thing is reiterated in a sentence which is in the previous chapter of the Passion narrative, which I didn't put in the synopsis. You find it in number 9. You remember, all these people come to arrest Jesus. They are all armed, with clubs and spears, etc., etc. That Jesus would betray, Judas would betrays him, and Peter takes the sword and cuts the ear of the high priest. The high priest who was in the crowd. Now, this is a symbolic thing. Cutting the ear means is a way of saying that the Jewish priests and leaders had lost the capacity to hear the word of God. So there is this idea suggested by that. But at the same time, Jesus reacts immediately. He says, do you think to put your sword back into its sheath? For all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot call upon my Father, and he will not provide me at this moment with more than 12 legions of angels? Okay? So it's not that Jesus cannot act, okay? But he decides not to, because he decides to wait for the Father to act. Now, I want just to spend a little moment trying to see from the narrative of Matthew in particular, try to answer this perennial question that comes back over and over again whenever every Good Friday. And every time there is a death actually in our lives, because we connect as Christians everything to the cross. So why Jesus died on the cross? Okay. Now, there are many ways of answering this question, but here in particular, in the Gospel of Matthew, there are two levels of explanation of why Jesus died on the cross. The first one is a very simple one. Okay. Jesus was murdered by people, okay, and this was a tragic accident. It was a tragic accident. It was something that was not supposed to happen. It was not something that was, you have all this kind of current of thought. Calling it thought is very generous, but like preaching in Christianity, it says the Father is basically the Father who decides the death of Jesus and wants him to die on the cross. Absolutely not. Okay, whenever there is a description or whenever any agent is named as responsible for the death of Jesus in the Gospels, it is people. And I put you a list. If you go to number 12, Jesus died because of a plot orchestrated by Jewish leaders, complicity of Judah and Peter, who betrayed him, the support of the mobs, the violence of the Roman soldiers, and the weakness or indolence, brutality or indifference of the Roman authority. And I put you all the passages. The chief priests and the elders decide to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. Judas Iscariot decides to betray him. So, it's people. Peter denies and to know Jesus. A great crowd goes with sword and clubs to arrest Jesus. The high priest proclaims the death sentence for Jesus. And the only reason why they sent him to the Romans is because the Jewish people, the Jewish leaders were not authorized to kill anyone. They had to go through the Roman authorities. The Jewish crowd, Pilate, as you know, asked the Jewish crowd, do you want Barabbas or do you want Jesus? They said, no, kill Jesus. Okay? And Pilate could have stopped it, but he was indifferent. I mean, to him, it was of no relevance. I mean, why should I he knew that Jesus was innocent. Okay, this is why it is a murder. It's not an execution. It is a murder. He knew that he was innocent, but he decided that, it was not his concern. So it's an act of grave injustice. Okay? Then the Roman soldiers, they could have simply taken Jesus to be crucified, but they taunted him, they tortured him, they insulted, they stripped him of his robe. So you see, the gospel is also very careful of naming all the possible actors. So that it's not the Romans who killed Jesus, it's not the Jewish people who killed Jesus, it's not Judah who killed Jesus. It was, in a sense, a very unlikely series of circumstances. Jesus, really was very good at putting everyone against him. And this happened only because he challenged the Roman authority. He challenged the Jewish authority. He also, in a sense, reminded everyone of where the priority should lie. So even those who were opposed to the Roman occupation, even those who were opposed to the Pharisees, like the Zealots, hated Jesus because he didn't support an armed insurrection against the Romans. So Jesus was a very uncomfortable figure. But this is clear in the Gospels, okay? So the Gospels never say that it is the Father who murdered Jesus. But here we reach the second level of explanation. Jesus knew about the plot, okay? And for a time, he didn't go to Jerusalem. He slept outside Jerusalem because he knew that they wanted to kill him. But there is a moment in which he decides to, was a choice of bravery, was a choice of bringing his testimony to the end. This is where a lot of conversation there can be. Knew about the plot and did not flee or oppose any resistance. And the prayer in Gethsemane comes here and provides us with a crucial key, number 13 in your handout. Then Jesus went with them, with the disciples, to a place called Gethsemane, and going a little farther, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." And he repeats the sentence 3 times. "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." So the question is, what was the will of the Father? What was the will of the Father? Your will be done. Where do we look for the will of the Father? Well, certainly not that Jesus should be murdered. Okay, certainly not that it should be murdered. This was the will of the actors of the plot. Rather, it was that Jesus should manifest. This was the will of the Father. By his death, what he had taught in his preaching and especially in the Sermon of the Mountain. So, do you want the explanation Jesus himself gives of why he died in the way he did? Well, you have the sentences that we have been meditating on for weeks now. "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the persecuted for righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And then he said, this other sentence is really probably one of the strongest. "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. And then, obviously, there is the last one. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. Okay? Love your enemies. Do not oppose the evil. Blessed are the meek. So this was what Jesus was determined to do. This was what the Father's will was, that Jesus should behave as son by not opposing evil, by loving his enemies, by remaining meek until the end, and also by not taking his cause into his own hands. Okay? This was going the way in which Jesus would reveal what it really means to be the Son of God. And it is so interesting that immediately after Jesus dies, there is this sentence you find in number 7, that when the centurion, Roman centurion, so we are talking about the Roman soldiers who, 3 hours earlier, 4 hours earlier, had taunted, tortured, and then crucified Jesus. So the head of that kind of squad, the head of that squad, okay, and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake. This is according to the Gospel of Matthew, there was an earthquake. But what took place, the way Jesus died. And they were filled with awe and said, truly, this was the Son of God. So you see, the devil says, if you are the Son of God, if you want to show that you are the Son of God, do all these miracles, these extraordinary things. Jesus says, well, that would give a wrong understanding of what it means to be God and to be the Son of God. The only way of showing who God really is by being meek, forgiving, and not opposing evil to evil until the end, until the extreme consequences. And lo and behold, when Jesus has led this kind of principle to the end, there is the proclamation. Someone, finally, the first one, recognizes that he is the Son of God. And he said, truly, this was the Son of God. Now, this is certainly not an exhaustive way of explaining the Passion narrative and why Jesus died on the cross. I mean, there is much, much more in it. My intention here was only to show to you how when you take a gospel in itself as a kind of contained literary text and pay attention to the parallelisms, the progression of the story, then you notice things that end up being relevant theologically. Okay? You understand why. So this sentence, is just one sentence among others. But why only in Matthew? Because Matthew, from the beginning, had taken this approach in trying to make us understand the mission and the vocation of Jesus. And obviously, this means that this is to be children of God. Okay, this is what it is to mean children of God. And when we go back to the Sermon on the Mountain, we are even more aware that before being a description of Christians, of what we should be, it is a description of who God is. And only, thanks to him, by taking, his cross, as Jesus says, that there you really go back to the sentence again, only in Matthew, come to me, all you are, under the burden, etc., etc. Take my cross on you and follow me, for I am meek and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. I'm going to stop here with this. Today I'll have to stop a bit earlier because I am main celebrant for Mass today, so I have to go a bit earlier.
The homily today?
The homily at 4 o'clock for evensong tonight. Yeah, but now I'm just celebrant. Yeah. Thank you so much. And so no lecture next week, no lecture next Sunday, and the last one of Matthew is going to be in 2 weeks on the 24th. Okay. God bless you and have a lovely Sunday.